What is going on, Trio Army? This is Charles coming at you with a painting tutorial for Warhammer 40K Space Marines. We'll be painting a Assault Intercessor Sargent. The Space Marines that I have is the factions of Salamanders, so I'll be using primarily green for my paints. Now I don't use Citadel paints, I use Army Painter because my local store has a wider variety of colors for Army Painter. So if you're using Citadel paints, the names that I'll be using will be different. So you'll just have to do match the colors up if you're using Citadel paints. I primarily use 3 brushes when I paint. I do a dry brush, a highlighting brush. You can also use a small round brush, and a super detail brush for, of course, the super details. I also have a pot of water, some napkins, and a palette to mix my paints up on. I also recommend getting something to hold your miniature. It makes it a lot easier. This little holder is from Citadel. It makes it nice and easy to hold it in the palm of your hand and work the model back and forth. Now, like I said, since I am painting the Salamander Space Marines, I chose a green that I liked. I chose green skin, and I'm gonna go ahead and start off using a highlighting brush to start applying this paint. Now, as you see, I'm applying the paint fairly thick. The brush is only slightly wet, but you want to take special care around detail areas with recesses. You can see the paint fills in the cracks, so I cleaned off my brush and came back with no paint on my brush to pull the excess paint out of those holes, because we want those details to show through later. Now, I like painting from the back forward, so after I've painted everything I want to be green, you see here on the shoulder pads I got some green, a little bit on the jetpack I got some green, places where green doesn't need to be, but since this is, I work from the back forward, when I go and apply new paints to other areas, I can paint over that no problem. Now we will be using a wash to give detail to our cracks. It's kind of a watered down ink. This is a military shade. And we'll take that wash and our highlighting brush and we'll focus primarily on the cracks or the deep lines. I'll go through and just do individual lines and lay that down fairly heavily, and then once that's done, then I'll do a very light coat over everything to kind of give it that dinge look. Now, there could be a point where you put too much wash in an area like this here, and you think to yourself, man, that's just way too much, I need to get rid of that. And that's not a problem at all. You can just dry your brush off on your paper cloth, your paper towel, and then come back in that area where it's too heavy and too thick, and you can pull the excess ink out of there. Now that we got our wash applied to our cracks and over the entirety of our area, we're ready to start doing a little bit of dry brushing to it and just kind of bring back a little more brighter green to it now. Now, with dry brushing, you just want to apply a little bit of paint to your dry brush and then get your paper towel or cloth, and you're going to brush most of the paint off to where you almost have nothing coming on the paper now, because you want to apply very, very light amount to the area. It's almost so small that you don't see it go on, but the more and more you rub, you see it kind of blend in, and this allows that dark region, those washes that we did, and then going all the way to this dry brushing here, it gives a nice gradual gradient from dark to light. Alright, now that we got our dry brushing done, we're ready to start adding a little bit more detail to our armor now. So we're going to take our shining silver, and we're going to start putting it on the small little details where we think metal should be. Little buttons or gadgets, little pins or rivets, little hoses on the armor that we think looks like should be metal. Now we're going to start adding some matte black to the spaces in between the power armor. It's usually behind the knees, hip area, butt area, hips, elbows. Once we have that completed, we're ready to start adding our highlights to our power armor. And this is simply taking our green or whatever primary color you use for your power armor and adding some white to it. You don't want to go too much with this, too overboard. If you highlight too many areas, it looks a little cartoonish. But you want to use the side of your highlighting brush and just gently graze the raised areas, any places you think the light would be shining from. Now that we've completed our power armor, we're ready to go to the belt area. I use hemp rope, and this color is going to go primarily on the handle of the power sword or the chain sword, the holster for the pistol, and the various items that your Space Marine may have on their belt. Once we have that completed, we want to add a little wash to it. I use a mid-brown wash, and this helps in two ways. One, it goes to the recesses of all the cracks to give it a little more definition, but also makes the brown that we apply to everything not seem so bright. It looks more dingy, a little more realistic. Now we can start on our weapons, our chainsword and our bolt pistol. Just cover the whole thing in black. I water it down just slightly, just so the black falls into the cracks of everything. Once that dries, we'll jump back into our silver and get the raised portions, the teeth of the chainsword, and various parts of the bolt pistol to make it stand out a little more. Once we have those details in, we're ready to start adding a little bit of bronze to our chainsword. I'm using a weapon bronze. You want to add a little bit of highlighting to your bolt pistol and sword. Just take your matte black and add a little bit of white to it to give yourself a little bit of gray. And just like before, use the edge of the brush to apply these highlights. Now I'm going to go ahead and grab some bright gold and start doing the edges of the shoulder pads. And don't worry about getting on the inside of the shoulder pads, because we're going to cover that up with black. And then I'll also do the feathers of the wings on the chest plate. Once that's completed, we're ready to start adding some black to the inside of the shoulder pads. This little medallion award thing here, and then we'll go and do the entirety of this jetpack. Alright, that's looking good. So let's go ahead and get into our silver now and add the metal components on our jetpack here. Alright, the jetpack's looking good, so now we're ready to move on to the next area, which is going to be the face. Now, the salamanders, if you follow their lore, their skin isn't normal flesh color. They have red eyes and an ash color flesh. So I mix a black and a white with just a touch of red to kind of give it that dried out, charred, ashy look. I don't want to put too much paint on here because I don't want to cover up all the details, so I water it down just slightly. Now we'll take that brown wash that we used previously and apply it to the face and let it fall into the cracks. And just like before, if you feel it's too thick in one area, dry your brush off and pull the excess out. Now comes the most nervous time for me, the red on the eyes. You could possibly do it before you do everything else in the face, but I like doing it last. Just make sure you don't have an excess amount of paint on your fine detail brush, and just kind of very lightly brush it on there and try not to hit anything else. And then don't forget to take your silver and get the metal parts around the head. And once you've done that, you've pretty much completed your Assault Intercessor Sargent. Now we still have to base the model, but that will come with a later video. I also added in a little bit of blood on the sword with some dry brushing with some red. So if you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, like, and share, and become a part of the Trio Army. And until next time, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.